According to the Government of Canada, nearly two-thirds of Canadians, 66%, are planning on a major purchase or expenditure within the next 3 years, including, but not limited to, buying a home or a condo as a principal resident, engaging in a home renovation project or a repair, going on vacation, or buying a vehicle, just to name a few. However, the question remains, are you financially able to absorb all of this activity while still having money in the bank for a rainy day? Jennifer Woodbeck Thompson is a financial coach who works with people on financial education and investing in them as an individual to protect their financial futures. She joined me this week to discuss how we can all have sustainable financial futures now and into the future with some smart and prudent planning. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, Jennifer, welcome to the show, and we're excited to talk to you all about financial security this morning. So great to see you, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I know that you spent 17 years in the healthcare field before you get into financial security and helping people protect their finances. So I'll start you off by asking you a two-part question having to do with the pandemic and just the unprecedented nature of it from a healthcare perspective. And how do you think it'll fundamentally change the way we manage our finances as Canadians?
Yeah. So, you know what? The biggest thing I've noticed with the pandemic is I already knew people were living paycheck to paycheck for a lot of what they spend, but for a lot of people, that paycheck disappeared. So there were the financial impacts were especially in the first few months before the government had some resources, people weren't able to pay bills. And one of the things I always do with my clients is talk about those rainy days. So planning, you know, we all hope we have jobs at the end of the day when we retire, but what happens in the meantime? We lose jobs, people switch jobs, people get sick. So the financial impact that happened for the beginning part of the pandemic was really hard on people.
And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on how it it has already financially impacted the healthcare system as a whole. So I'm just wondering your thoughts maybe on how you think the healthcare industry may be able to rebound financially from the pandemic.
So how the healthcare systems are doing?
Yes,
Yeah. So, you know what, it's interesting because I've actually, I was asked to go back and help at the hospital. So my first career, like you mentioned, was in healthcare, and I worked as a respiratory therapist. So I work specifically in chronic lung diseases. So of course, this COVID is a lung disease. So I was asked to come help a little bit at the hospitals again to offset a bit of what the other respiratory therapists were doing, just as an extra resource. So I've seen in the healthcare system, you know, so many people are overworked again, nurses, doctors, you know, all the, you know, frontline workers, paramedics. My husband's a paramedic. So, you know, all the stress, not just the amount of work, but the stress and the fear that went along with it. Of course, with that too, there's all that extra funding needed to implement new systems in hospitals. So the hospital systems are on a tight budget, I would assume. I don't do the budgeting part for them, but the resources they had and where our government has kicked in, there's going to be some gaps. And so I always say I'm curious what's going to happen in the next couple years. I really hope our taxes don't go up, but I just don't know where the resources that went to healthcare and the resources that have CERB and those other systems to help people stay afloat, I don't really know where that came from or how it's going to be paid back to the government to have a pool. So the next few years are going to be really interesting, just to see the government financial impact and how that impacts all our Canadians too.
Now, shifting gears to what you do now, you now say that it's time for people to sort of reevaluate their finances, their debts, and the legacy they want to leave for the people that they care about. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because even before the pandemic, I would see people all the time that, were interested in, setting up life insurance for their families so that they could leave that legacy behind. But when it came to debt and we're trying to look at how to reclaim debt, most people don't realize that your debt is left behind. If you pass away, it doesn't just go away. It gets passed on to either your spouse, to your children, somebody has to pay that back. So there's ways in which we have to protect everyone we leave behind. People don't recognize this. And of course, with things like debt, especially that happened when people lost jobs or were no longer working as much as possible, it made a big difference. So a lot of what I do is, helping people understand different structures so that they can make informed decisions. And then of course, making sure that debt is broken down to a reasonable rate that they can pay it off and get rid of it. Because your debt only continues to accumulate if you're paying minimal balances on a credit card or minimal balances. It will continue to grow and grow and grow. And most people don't realize that. As long as they pay the minimal on a credit card statement, they think they're good. So there's a lot of misunderstanding out there.
And now you say you're on a mission to better financially educate people so that they can sort of build their finances. You already spoken today about having a rainy day fund, but you also said you're on a mission for financial education. So can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. So as a financial professional, I don't look at just getting you to retirement. I think it's more important to understand the steps in what's happening realistically and how to educate the person so that, it's not just based on blind faith anymore. You need to understand there's, all kinds of systems in place. People are having a lot more mistrust for what people tell them. So I think the power is in the people that I talk to that they understand, so that education is coming. I provide it. I have resources. I have handouts. I love talking to people like you about systems and things that are there, so that at the end of the day, they understand that education point and they feel more comfortable. And I really think, so recently I wrote a book too, not to self-promote myself, but I wrote a book about it.
Absolutely. It's all about shameless promotion, isn't it?
It is. But the book specifically is about understanding how to be almost like your own financial advisor. So every question that the financial advisor would ask you is in the book, so that you can understand why we ask these sometimes odd questions, but it's to get a better picture and empower these people to make sure they understand why and what they can do with their finances.
And you also say you want to focus on the individual and their needs from a financial perspective to set them up for a prosperous financial future. So can you tell me about that?
For sure. So, it's unfortunate. I know I'm not going to say, necessarily bad things about the banks, but the way, typical banking systems work are that people fit in an umbrella or they fit in a bucket. So based on, your net worth, here, or here, that's kind of what sets you up for what resources you can have within that structure. But I really don't believe in that system. So I think it's more important for people to understand their options differently so that they can make more informed decisions. And in that way too, then they can grow better in their money. So then understanding the reasonings why, understanding where it's going, and understanding how to plan for tragic events if they happen to come up. So, we don't want this pandemic, of course, to last any longer, but unfortunately, we have people losing jobs every day. So how do we better prepare ourselves? And I think the best way to do that is to better understand where your money is, where it's going, and what you're doing with it. So it's a huge amount of work for people such as yourself or other people to understand, but you know what? It's so important to know what's going on.
And I'm curious, you piqued my interest when you answered about the financial security of individuals. And one thing I try to do through this podcast is promote equality for people with disabilities as well. So I'm just curious, during this time, if people are who have disabilities are on fixed incomes, or people who are on fixed incomes in general, what would you say to them about effectively managing their finances?
Well, a big part in what I 100% believe in is tracking and budgeting. And if you listen to other interviews or other things I've done, you'll hear budget and track. I think it's too easy for people to just, put down, tap a card, spend here, put something, order online and put it on a credit card, but we're not tracking enough as to where our money is, what we're doing, and then we get surprised when that credit card comes in and has a balance of a few $100s that we maybe didn't even realize we had. So to me, regardless of what your income is, fixed income or a surplus of income, everybody's in the same boat in that we're not paying enough attention to where our money's coming in and going out. And I think, of course, if people are on a fixed income, that mindset is another part of it where they think, I can't afford, can't afford, can't afford. And then you have bad feelings and bad motions about money. And I really try and work with people to get out of that mindset. We can't sometimes fix what the problem is or what's going on with that money, but we can find ways to make that money grow better for you and budget it properly to pay the bills that need to be paid. And maybe it might mean, I call it like a money diet, but budget a little bit to kind of see where things are at to make it work better. I think too much of the time people just tap cards, like I said, and then they move on and don't realize what's happening.
And can you tell me, what are 2 or 3 things you think that are common mistakes or missteps that people make with their finances that you think are easily correctable if they put together a effective financial plan?
So I think most people, and again, not bashing the banks because they're great and we need them, but I think most people just have blind faith in the bank system in a sense that they just, go in and I always call it RRSP season between January to March, but the bank teller will say to you, have you started your RRSPs? Have you done this? Have you done that? And we just say, oh, no, we haven't, or yes, we have. And we just do the steps that we're told. It is amazing to me, though, we go through some of those systems, but yet if you don't feel comfortable that that's the right decision for you, people are afraid to say no to the banks. But you have to feel comfortable in what you're doing and understand the reasonings why. I think there's a little bit of mistrust for financial professionals because things like, again, not bashing them, but things like Questrade or online trade of cryptocurrencies, they have all these great, wonderful ads that they put out there, and they show people making, so much money in a month, and everyone wants that, big lotto fast ticket that they could get. And, they think that's the quick fix, but really having the faith in a financial professional, even just to ask questions. A lot of people think if they ask a question, there's a fee attached to it, but I always tell people, email me, I will answer questions, get a hold of me, find me on Instagram, anywhere else. I love these conversations because the power should be for you to actually know what you're doing. So education is a huge component of what people need to take a better stance on so that they feel comfortable in their decisions. So I think a lot of lack of trust is why people go to things like Google. Google fixes everything. So you Google search some questions, people think they know the answers, but have faith in your actual financial advisors that are supporting you in a way that works for you.
And tell me, how do you think the way we manage finances is going to change within the next 3 to 5 years?
Interesting question. So I think more people realize with this pandemic that they need to make a shift. So I think I get lots of phone calls often that are, I think I need to do this, or I need to get a hold of my debt, or I need to figure out what's going on. And we have those conversations, but a lot of time people are not change. So if you want to do it, that's great, but you also have to stick to it. So I'm, like I said earlier, I'm a big advocate for tracking and budgeting, and it doesn't mean it's for life, but it means to get back on track and understand what's going on. I think the only way people are really going to be able to get through this financial crisis of this pandemic, and it may last another year, who knows, but the only way we're going to actually get through it is to really understand for people to understand where their money is going in, where it's going out, are there ways to cut, set up that rainy day fund, and then you'll be much better in your financial future.
And again, I'm sorry, I have one more follow-up for you in terms of how I always tell people that they make time for the things that are important to them. So how do you think we can better motivate people to take a better care of their finances?
Well, so there's a couple things. I do for my clients, and I have it on my website too, that anyone wants it, they can go there. But I have budget sheets, and so I just tell people on a weekly basis, at the end of each night, on a daily basis, at the end of each night, just write in everything that you spent that day. It could take you, 3 minutes. Leave it by your bed, just write it in. Did you spend $2 on a coffee? Did you spend $4 on lunch? Did you spend $20 on lunch? Write it in at the end of the day, and then just put it away. At the end of the week, so on a Sunday night, take 20 minutes and look at it and just kind of see where you are. If you even spent 30 minutes in a week looking at what you've spent, you're going to have a better idea. And you're going to know where things are and say, oh, maybe I didn't need to do that, or maybe I spent too much, or maybe, hey, I didn't spend as much as I thought. That's great. But just having a little more awareness of what we're doing is definitely going to make a huge difference for where we're going.
And I'm curious to know, when you're not working, what is it that you like to do to sort of decompress and find what makes you happy as a person?
That's awesome. Great question. So I'll always say I'm married. I am married. I always forget to mention him, but I'm married to a wonderful man. We have 2 lovely boys. So they're 8 and 12. So we like to do a lot of things with them. It's funny. I've just been like everybody else because the pandemic, we can't get outside as much. Watching a lot of Netflix, but
Me too. Sorry. Me too.
but typically before that, we would do a lot of hiking. We love going to the movies. I love restaurants, which we used to do all the time once a week because
Can't do that anymore, huh?
I know, but that's one of the things I talk about in the book too. Like that's my weakness, is going to restaurants. So I budget for that. I know within my budget, this is what we're going to do. If we went to a higher end restaurant and spent more money, then we skip it the next week. But part of that is enjoying the things that you like to do. But typically, I'm just like anybody else, but spending time with my kids, doing things outside, that's pretty much my basic needs are my husband and my kids.
And I know that you spent some time in the healthcare field before you got into finances. Is there anything that you miss about being in that field? I know you said your husband's a paramedic, but is there anything you miss personally about being in that field on a full-time basis?
What I do miss the conversations with the patients and families. Everybody has a story. And so I get that a lot when I'm talking to people in finance, but it's different when somebody's sick in a hospital and, getting to sit there and hold their hand and have conversations that are, whether they're about how they're getting better or whether about how they're getting worse, and being able to connect with people on a more emotional level, and just being there for them as they take their last breath and supporting families. Like something that I have a passion for, and it's something I don't do that end of it with my financial clients, but I'm very comfortable in those conversations. So especially having those conversations with people about their end-of-life finances is really important just the same. And that's what got me into this, was because I saw too many families affected when somebody passed away or got sick or had an accident early in life, and the family wasn't set up for that. So I still love having my healthcare conversations with people. It's just different when it's that more emotional bonding when you're working in a hospital that I miss.
Absolutely. And if people want to get connected with you or purchase your book, which you mentioned earlier, how do they do that?
Sure. So the easiest way to probably find me, I do have a website that is friendlyfinancecoach.com. So my contact information is on there, as well as a link to purchase my book is on there. And of course, my phone number. So email, phone number. I love talking to people about these conversations. So I can be reached on friendlyfinancecoach.com.
Fantastic, Jennifer. I want to take a few minutes to thank you for joining me this morning to have a most important discussion, especially at this time. So I want to thank you for your time. Really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Fantastic, Jennifer.